I'm so glad that you asked me to speak today, and I'd like to apologize for not being there, but it just didn't meet with my plans. I'm a busy person teaching full-time here at the college, and I just wasn't able to be there. But anytime that somebody asks me to speak on financial literacy, I do whatever I can to make it happen. And when it comes to that, it's actually financial literacy and governance, as you guys are dealing with here, I just can't miss it. That's just the way I am. So those are two things that are very dear to my heart, is financial literacy and governance. So I'm really glad that I could make this happen this way, and we come to you digitally. So financial literacy. Way back when I was doing my master's thesis back in 2004, I keyed in on financial literacy. So it was before it was in to talk about it. But I had realized that a lot of the financial information that we were issuing was not being heard by people, and I didn't really understand why. So my master's thesis was on trying to communicate that information better. But it led to, why do we have this gap in financial literacy? Why can't people understand these numbers that I am find so near and dear and understand so well? Why are there people that can't understand it? And so I did some research, and part of it goes back to our school system. In our school system, if somebody isn't good at numbers, what we say is, well, you know, they're just not mathematically inclined, and we kind of let it go. And I think we have to start to deal with the numeracy skills a little bit like our literacy skills, that you know, if a child can't read, we throw every resource at it that we can to make sure that the child can read. But if the child is kind of bad in numeracy, we seem to accept that that's just the way it is. And it's really not working for us in our society. Right now there's a study that was in the Globe and Mail a year and a half ago, so in the spring of 2011, and they actually showed that 40% of all people in Canada do not have the financial literacy to manage their own personal affairs. And so we can realize how that must translate it when we talk to in organizations and governments, how many people there actually have the information to handle their own financial affairs. And the percentage is going to be much less because the complexity of the numbers and the finances that have to be dealt with. So we have to change financial literacy. Canada's had a task force on financial literacy. I spoke to the task force in Ottawa. I sent a submission and talked to them about, and one of my submissions I'll talk about a little later was actually made it to their top 20 list. So I was quite proud of that. So we have to think about financial literacy in our organization. We have to address it, and we have to change the way things are. And so that leads us into, well, do we really have to? Is it important? Why should we care? And one of the reasons that we need to care is because of the importance of money in our organization. Okay, so why should you care? Well, you have to care because money is important. I'm going to tell you a story that I like to tell that sort of makes you I hope it will make you reframe how you think about money. I actually live on Ktunaxa territory, and on Ktunaxa territory, one of the staples of the winter diet is weskan. And weskan is a kind of a jerky elk. They cut the elk really, really thin, and they salt it, and then they cook it over a hot, hot fire, and it makes this dried meat. And with the dried meat, then it doesn't go moldy, and it stays all winter. So it becomes a big part, it was a big part of their winter staple diet. So we have a young man get up one morning, and he decides that they really don't have enough weskan to get through the winter, and he should go out and he should kill an elk. So he goes out, and the earth provides for him, and he kills an elk, and he guts it, and he drags it back home, and he says, "Wife, we need to make weskan." And she says, "Well, that's all well and fine, but I don't have enough salt to make weskan." And he goes, "Okay, I know where I can get some salt." He throws a quarter of the elk on his back, and he treks off to the person who's actually made the trek from the Kootenays to the ocean to actually get salt from the ocean, and he's trekked it back. So lot of work to do that. And he says to the man, he says, "I'd like to trade this quarter of an elk for some salt." And the fellow says, "Well, that's all well and fine, you know, but you're a little bit late. There's been a few people here. I've actually got more than enough elk, so I don't really need it. But what I do need is I need some really tightly woven baskets so the next time I make the trek, I can bring back even more salt. I know a woman, she spends her days and her evenings actually weaving tight little baskets. I'm going to go down and see her, see if she will trade some baskets for the elk, and then I can get the salt. So he goes down to see the woman and he takes the elk, and she says, I'm sorry, I don't need any elk, but she said, but see, I have a broken teepee pole. And when the snows come, my teepee's going to fall in. What I really need is a teepee pole. And he goes, my cousin cut teepee poles, and he's been turning them every day all summer long so that they'll dry nice and straight. So he goes to see his cousin, and lo and behold, thankfully, his cousin says, oh, I'd love a quarter of an elk. Here's a teepee pole. So now he can go back and he can take the teepee pole to the old woman, and he gets the salt, and he goes back, and luckily it was a cool fall day and not a hot fall day, and the elk is just fine, and he and his wife can start to make the waskan that they need. So what happened there? Well, what happened there, first of all, you have to realize is that the commodities that we were dealing with was a teepee pole and a basket and salt, and that what we were doing there is we were trading our energies. So even though a quart of an elk for some salt seems like not a great trade nowadays, back then when you had to walk so far and you had to put out so much energy to get salt, that was an even trade, and it was deemed to be an even trade. And the woman who sat and she collected the grasses and she wove the baskets, she had hours and hours and hours in a basket. So, you know, a couple of baskets for a quart of an elk was a trade based on the energy that went into it. And the teepee pole, cutting the poles, first going out and finding the straightest trees that were just the width that you wanted, and then turning them over and over again. We had the energy that went into that made it equal to a quart of an elk. So now let's think about trying to run our own organizations on this basis. So I've got to pave 10 miles of road. I've got to pay teacher salaries. I got to fix the school bus, and I want to do it trading. Well, it would be impossible for us to run a government or any organization, let alone our own personal life, that way. And so we have to start to rethink how we're doing things. And money is this gift that's been given to us so that we can make these trades. And so by trading through that, we see that money is actually energy. It's the way that we actually trade our energies. I can stand at the college and give a lecture, go home that night, get on my computer, buy a pair of Ugg boots from Australia, and I can actually trade the energy I expended at the college with a sheep farmer in Australia. So that's pretty unreal when you start to think about it. So money is the way that we put our energies into it, and it's the way we trade our energies. So if we start to think about how we need to respect energy, then we really have to start to respect money. And I think you already know this, that when you actually do a budget, you realize that where you allocate the money is the activities that get done, and that's where the energy goes, and that's the things that happen. So with thinking about money as being energy, we have to then realize that the most important job in your organization is the CFO, because the CFO is the keeper of the energy. Hopefully I convinced you a little bit that money is important. It's not something that's just been created by governments or white men or something like that. It's actually a gift that allows us to run our organizations and allows us to run our personal life. So if we agree that it's important and we realize we have financial literacy problems, what can we do? So where I'm going to go with this, I want to give you sort of 3 strategies that the individual can do and 3 strategies that the government can actually do and move forward and actually change some of the financial literacy dynamics that exist now. So the first one as an individual is you have to assess where you're at, and you have to be honest about it. I gave a talk on financial literacy at the college, and there were some 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year university students, and about half the room was professors. And so when I asked them who actually had the financial literacy skills to manage their life and make sure that they had enough money put away for retirement, almost every hand in the room went up. And then I talked about financial literacy, and I talked about the complexities of it, and I talked about the problems of it. And just to get to the end of it all, because I don't have time here to give that whole speech, is that in the end of it, I asked the same question again. Who actually has the skills to ensure that they're going to have the retirement that they desire? And nobody put up their hands. So this is a very, very complex problem. So you have to assess as an individual where you're at it. Are you back that you need to gather numeracy skills? Is that where you're at? And if that's where you're at, there's all kinds of things available to you. You know, you can go to a London Drugs and you can buy a workbook that's meant for children, and you can start to do your multiplications and your division and get those skills up, if that's where you're at. If it's learning financial language, you can start to take a course, you can take a workshop, you can just start listening to Susie Orman. You know, watching, there's a few television shows out now that you can watch, because this whole financial literacy is kind of a vogue talk right now. But you need to know where you're at, and you sort of have to set a game plan of where you want to be and start that way. The next thing you do is you actually have to start to challenge yourself. And when you do come across something that is of a financial nature that you don't completely understand, just learn one thing. One new thing on it every time it comes across your desk. So if you've been issued, maybe it's the band financial statement, which comes in as 129 pages. I mean, that's pretty daunting to start to think, well, I'm going to read 129 pages and I'm going to understand everything about the band's finances. Well, that's probably not going to happen. But if every time you come across the document, you decide, I'm going to teach myself one thing about this document, and I'm going to proceed, I'm going to go ask somebody about it, but I'm going to challenge myself, and every time a piece of financial information comes that I don't understand, I'm going to learn one thing about it. It's actually one of my things is I'm pretty financially literate, but with technology in my teaching, it can be really overwhelming, all the different things that are being thrown at us, that we can make these online dynamic classes. And so I've sort of taken that kind of tact with that. Every class I have, I try to add one little piece of technology in it that improves my teaching. And it's not so bad when I'm just adding one, 8 classes a year. That's 8 things a year that I'm adding to a class, which seems a lot there. But if I decide that, I should be doing this and I should be doing this, and it becomes overwhelming. So just challenge yourself and try to learn one thing every time you run into something where you feel that you're being, your financial literacy is being challenged. Answer the challenge and learn one thing. The other thing I'll have to talk, is you have to start to talk about this. We have to talk about this at every level. I have a nephew, and he's kind of went through a stage where he was like, Auntie Elainee was everything to him. Okay, so in that time, he decided he wanted to be an accountant. I mean, he's not going to be an accountant. I can tell that he's a big lacrosse player, and he can no more sit at a desk all day. And I don't really see that changing as he grows up. But he decided this. So we're sitting and we're having breakfast one morning, and he's at my house, and he says, "Well, if I am an accountant," he says, "how much do you make, Auntie?" And his mother said, "Oh, you can't ask people what they make." And I said, of course, if he doesn't ask his favorite auntie what she makes, who is he going to talk to numbers about? How does he know this is? So I started to explore this a little bit more, and I was actually preparing a PowerPoint for a discussion like this. And I decided I wanted some kind of PowerPoint that was talking about the taboo of talking about money. So I typed in taboo in the clip art website that I was on, and sure enough, the first thing that came up was a person talking, and the big comic bubble above their head had a big $sign in it. Well, I was really happy, because it doesn't take much for it to make us teachers happy. When you find the absolute perfect clip art, it's one of those things that makes you happy. But it is one of the last taboos. There are people that would rather talk to you about their sex life than talk about their finances. And there's something wrong with that. So we have to start to talk about the finances. There are a lot of organizations out there that are preying on us and saying, they don't want us to talk about finances. They don't want us to talk about our financial problems, because they will come in and they will answer all your problems, whether it's right or not. And you can bet they're going to make a big buck in the go of it. So we have to start to talk about it. It's sort of one of the last taboo subjects. We have to talk about, and that's one of the things that happened when I was giving that talk at the college when we were talking about people's retirement, is that they didn't realize it was okay not to know. And every once in a while I have to just say, I don't know, and I say in front of my students, I don't know. You know, we can't know it all. And when it comes to finances, often we pretend that we do know it all. We pretend that we have it all together. And it's something that we're doing, and we have to stop that. We have to start to talk and be honest. When we don't know something, let's be honest that we don't know it. Let's share our knowledge. Let's teach our children. And perhaps your children should know how much money you have in the bank. And as obscene as that seems to many of you, that's something that you should consider. So what can the government do? What can the government as an organization, what can they do? Well, the first thing that I'm going to suggest that you do is pay attention to your chief financial officer position. It is often a really crappy job, and I can tell you as somebody who was 5 years in that position for a tribal council that I got worn out. It is often overworked, sometimes the poorest office in the place. I know we had a mouse problem. It's not really well respected. When you're trying to bring everything back to money, which is you're trying to be the keeper of the energy, and you're trying to bring things back to money, because that's what has to be answered to. People start to see you as shallow. People start to see you as the evil person. People start to see you as the person who's always raining on their parade. And that has to kind of change. So if you want your best and your brightest to pick and go into finance, you're going to have to change that dynamic of that job. You're going to have to make it a good job, because I can tell you, as somebody who's been teaching out of college for 11 years, the best and the brightest look at their job and want it to fit in as a piece of their life puzzle. It is not their life. It is a piece of their life puzzle. And they go out there looking for a career that fits into their life puzzle. And so if this is a really crappy, dog-eared, chewed-up piece of the puzzle, they're not going to pick it. And I've been teaching in the Aboriginal Financial Managers program now for 5 years at the college, and we still have yet to have a graduate. So it's something has to change. In order for your communities to work, it should be one of your own in that position. Somebody like me, after 5 years, I got burnt out and I walked away. Wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't have to worry about people that were there. As it was, I was involved with the AFOA, so I was still kind of there. But a lot of people can just walk away if they're not of that community. They can just walk away. The best part, if you're thinking of it as the keeper of the energy, you really want it to be one of your own that has that job. So you have to look at that dynamic. You have to model into a good model. You can look at kids and say, this is a good job. And they know very well by the things that you said over dinner, or the way that person's office looks, the things that are said in the background. They know what people think about that job. So you have to change the dynamics of that job. The next thing that has to be done in the government organization is you have to change the way you communicate financial information. And this may mean that when you're shopping for that CFO, that communication becomes kind of foremost when you're actually selecting candidates. I told you before that I spoke to the task force and I'd actually made a submission, and this is the submission that I spent a long time I spoke to in that. Is what we have now is we have people in finance, and they talk kind of at this level for the information. And then we have the people of the community talking at this level. And so when we talk about financial literacy, everything was like, okay, let's bring these people up to here. And I was like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why do we have to accept that the information is being offered at this level? I think this is more what has to happen, that we have to give the financial information in a simpler form that's easier to digest, that's easier to understand, and then we improve the financial literacy of somebody so that we actually start to get the communication going on. So we have to change the way that we're communicating. We have to start to tell people things that actually interest them. We have to start to say, not only did we spend $50,000 in a job creation plan, we actually created 8 jobs. Now it seems like we just say we spent $50,000 on a job plan, we didn't go over it, it must be a success. We don't even talk about what the performance ended up being, what we actually got for the energy of that $50,000. And so we have to change the way we communicate. financial information. We have to make it easier for people to understand. So we're not only just bringing people up in their financial literacy, we're bringing the information down. It doesn't have to be that complicated. The last new car I bought, I've been in finance since I was 19, which is a long time, believe me. And when I went to sign the final contract, there was a $150 charge there that I didn't know was coming. And then they tried to tell me they'd been there all along. And I went, no, 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 no. So people are taking advantage of you all the time. I didn't pay the $150. They took it off my contract because I was willing to walk without it, because it should have been there way up front, way before that. And it may have only been $150 in the context of a car, but it was just a money grab. It didn't cost them $150 to fill in that form. The third thing that the government has to do is they have to offer opportunities for people to better themselves. So in-house workshops, even just sessions where the CFO actually presents the information to them in a way that they can actually understand it, perhaps engaging the youth into it. So there has to be opportunities that actually are thinking of expanding financial literacy at every corner that they can, to everyone in the community. So not just to employees, but to everybody in the community, because it does a service for everyone. So I hope I've got you thinking a little bit about financial literacy and how it maybe impacts you personally and how it impacts your organization. We talked about financial literacy, and we talked about the challenges that aren't just a First Nations challenge, they're really a Canada-wide challenge, and I think maybe even a worldwide challenge. As finances have gotten more complicated, people just haven't kept up at all. So there has to be a change there. We talked about the energy of money, and I hope I started to make you think a little bit different about money. It's not just this dirty, filthy lucre. In fact, when people say money is the root of all evil, that's actually a misstatement. The lack of money is the root of all evil, okay? And that's actually the original statement, so it got twisted somewhere around. Money isn't evil. Money is energy. Money is good. I talked to you about what you could do as an individual, and I said first you had to assess where you were with your financial literacy skills. And then you should challenge yourself to start to learn something new every time you come across financial information that you don't understand. And thirdly, to start to talk about it. Talk about it to your kids. Talk about it to your employees. That we have to start to talk about it and realize, you know, it's one of those things that we're keeping hidden, and we have to understand there's a lot of people out there having a problem with it. And the more we talk about it, the more we'll learn from each other. As a government organization, we talked about three things. We talked about changing the dynamic of the CFO position. So I really hope you will look at that and make it a desirable thing to be. After all, it is the keeper of the energy. The second thing we talked about was changing the way that you communicate financial information and having more friendly sessions where you talk to the communities and to elected officials, to employees, and so that people can, so it's actually a communication, that people are actually understanding what you're saying. If they didn't understand what you were saying, then it's not really a communication. And the last thing I'd said for organizations to do was that they should offer opportunities wherever they see them to expand financial literacy, both in the community, within the employees, and in the organization. They have to look at every time they can. If they get a chance to offer a workshop, they should probably offer the workshop. And you can really make some changes here. I know you're talking about governing here, and I believe approaching the financial literacy problem that exists out there is a big chance at improving your governance. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. It's been a pleasure. I only wish I could have been here in person.